Vallabha Girivardhari
Gopi Jana Vallabha
Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivardhari
Gopi Jana Vallabha
Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Ashtotar Shata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Jaya Om Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajaka Ashtotar Shata Shri Srimad Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai Vimsikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakti Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shamakun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Vrindavandam Ki Jai Navadvip Dham Ki Jai Mathura Dham Ki Jai Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Tulasi Devi Ki Jai Yamuna Maya Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Samaveta Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Gauranga. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2. It's nice to have the title. Canto 2, The Cosmic Manifestation. Chapter 1, The First Step in God Realization, Text 29. Indra Dayo Bhavaha or Bahava Karno Dishaha Shrotram Amusha Shabdaha Nasatya Dasro Paramasya Nase Krano Sya Gandho Mukham Agnir Idaha Indradayo Bahava Ahur Ushraha Karno Disha Shotram Amusha Shabdaha Asatya Drasro Nasatya Dasro Paramasya Nase Kranosya Gandho Mukham Agnir Idaha Indradayo Bahava Ahur Ushraha Karno Disha Shotrama Musha Shabdaha Na Satya Dasro Paramasya Nase Kranosya Gandho Mukham Agnir Idha Indradayo Bahava Ahur Ushraha Karno Disha Shotrama Musha Shabdaha Na Satya Dasro Paramasya Nase Kranosya Gandho Mukham Agnir Idha
Indradayo Bahava Ahurushra
Indradayo Bhava Ahurusha
Karno Disha Shrotramamusha Shabda
Karno Disha Shotramamusha Shabdaha
Nasatyadasro Paramasya Nase
Na Satya Dasro Paramasya Nase
Grano Shagandho Mukamagniridha
Ranosya Gandho Mukam Agnir Idaha
Indradayo Bahava Ahurusha
Indradayo Bhava Ahurusha
Karno Disha Shrotra Mamusha Shabdaha
Karno Disha Shotramamusha
Musha
Shabdaha
Shabda
Nasatya Dasro Paramasya Nase Grano Shagandho Mukamagnirida Indradayo Bahava Ahurusha Karno Disha Shrotra Mamusha Shabdaha
Karno Shashotramamusha Shabdaha
Nasatyadasro Paramasya Nase
Nase
Granosya Gandho Mukamagniriddha
Granosya Gandho Mukam Agnir Idha
Indradayo Bhavava Ahurusha
Indradaya Bhava Ahurushaha
Karno Disha Shotamamusha Shabdaha
Karno Disha Shotramamusha Shabdaha
Nasatyadasro Paramasya Nase
Satyadasho Paramasya Nase
Viranosya Gandho Mukunda Magnirda
Grahanusya Gandho Mukam Agnir
Indradayo Bahava Ahurushaha
Indradaya Bhava Ahurushaha
Karno Disha Shrotam Amushya Shabdaha
Karno Disha Shotramamusha Shabdaha
Nasatyadasra Paramasya Nase
Na Satyadasho Paramasya Nase
Krano Shekandho Mukamagnidaha
Ranusya Gandho Mukam Agnir Idaha
Indradayo Bahavahu
Indradayo Bhava Ahurushaha
Karno Disha Shrotramamusha Shabda
Karno Disha Shotramamusha Shabdaha
Nasatyadasro Paramasya Nase
Na Satyadasro Paramasya Nase
Grano Sagandho Mukamagniridha
Ranusya Gandho Mukam Agnir Idaha Indra Adayaha Demigods headed by the heavenly king Indra Bahavaha arms Ahuhu are called Ushraha the demigods Karno, the ears. Dishaha, the four directions. Shrotram, the sense of hearing. Amusha, of the Lord. Shabdaha, sound. Nasatya Dasro, the demigods known as the Ashvini Kumaras. Paramasya, of the Supreme. Nase, nostrils. Ranaha, the sense of smell. Asya, of him. Gandaha, fragrance. Mukham, the mouth. Agnihi, fire. Idaha, blazing. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. His arms are the demigods headed by Indra. The 10 directional sides are his ears, and physical sound is his sense of hearing. His nostrils are the 2 Ashvini Kumaras, and material fragrance is his sense of smell. His mouth is the blazing fire. Purport. The description of the gigantic form of the personality of Godhead made in the 11th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is further explained here in the Srimad Bhagavatam. The description in the Bhagavad Gita 11:30 runs as follows. O Vishnu, I see you devouring all people in your blazing mouths and covering all the universe by your immeasurable rays. Scorching the worlds, you are manifest. In that way, Srimad Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study for the student of the Bhagavad Gita. Both of them are the science of Krishna, the absolute truth, and so they are interdependent. The conception of the Virat Purusha, or the gigantic form of the Supreme Lord, is said to include all the dominating demigods, as well as the dominated living beings. Even the minutest part of a living being is controlled by the empowered agency of the Lord. Since the demigods are included in the gigantic form of the Lord, worship of the Lord, whether in his gigantic material conception or in his eternal transcendental form as Lord Sri Krishna, also appeases the demigods and all the other parts and parcels, as much as watering the root of a tree distributes energy to all of the tree's other parts. Consequently, for a materialist also, worship of the universal gigantic form of the Lord leads one to the right path. One need not risk being misled by approaching many demigods for fulfillment of different desires. The real entity is the Lord himself, and all others are imaginary, for everything is included in him only. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishram Shtapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raganatan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha He Krishna Kruna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Is
the universal form is described in a way that it's like the word Rishikesh. Rishikesh means master of the senses. the Lord is the master of the senses means, in one sense, he controls all the senses. He's the controller of all senses. And just like if let's say the government wants to begin a telephone line. So they make the arrangements through their departments, their workers, their funds, and they arrange a telephone line so they can use it for conducting their business. And then they may also include that others can use it too. So they have all these lines, phone lines, and now they say, well, we don't just, we can also make it available for the other living entities, people who are not in the government directly. So then they set it up. So they're using actually the same system, but it's managed a little differently by the demigods rather than directly. So in this way, we can get an idea how, because it says in the scriptures that when the Lord sees, then we can see, the living entities can see. And the seeing power of the Lord is the sun and the moon, especially the sun, because it's without the sunlight we can't see. Our eyes don't work. Therefore, the eye of the Lord is the sun, or sun and moon. And then when the Lord has his seeing system for this material world, then we also are allowed to take part in that seeing power. We are allowed to have our little seeing, not on the same level as him, because we can't light up a whole universe with all our electric lights. Even if we put all the energy we can imagine into coming up with some really great lighting system, it wouldn't compare to the sun. It'd just be insignificant. So that's how we can understand. Everything is actually, he's the master of the senses. They're all his senses. And he allows the living entities to use some of his sense power, some of his seeing power. We're empowered or given some ability to see because Krishna sees, God sees. We can smell because he can smell. We can taste because he can taste. Therefore, the idea of personality can't be overstressed, or the need for it can't be overstressed. This is what's missing in the so-called modern scientific method, which tries to exclude the personality. Got it. But you can't, because what can see except a living being? Do you know of anything that can see a living being? No. Or smell. These are personal abilities. So you can't remove the personality of Godhead, even from the universal form, even from the living entities. They have to be connected with the person. And another point here that's mentioned is that all the living entities are in the universal form, even down to the smallest little germ. They're all controlled. We may think, oh, it's random. There's so many different bugs. They come out in the summer. Somehow or other they come. Not somehow or other. There cannot be one deviation in the Lord's plan. It's so well organized that if one into a certain spider, if he says, I'm not going to do this anymore, spin webs, I'm going to use a different method. I'm getting my food. I'm going to be like a lizard. I'll just jump in and bite it. He can't do it. He's not allowed to do that. If he tried, we may think they never try, but they may try. It's like humans try. Humans are given more facility to make a serious attempt to not follow the Lord's plan. Even still, it's like the prisoners. Prisoners, the criminals, they make a big attempt not to follow the government. They say, I'm never following the government. But is it true that he's never following the government? Where is he existing right now?
In the government's
Which penitentiary is in? Yeah, he's in the government's penitentiary saying that he'll never follow the government. He'll never cooperate. But is he cooperating? Yes. And if he doesn't like the facilities he has now, he'll cooperate. They'll put him in a straitjacket or tie him with chains. And he can say with chains, I'll never obey the government. You're still obeying, sir. It's just you keep getting more and more implicated in how you're being forced to act by the government. If you deal nicely with the government, they'll let you travel anywhere you want in the world. They'll give you all kinds of things. But if you don't behave nicely with the government, if you don't respect the government, then they'll disrespect you also. So these philosophers say that there couldn't be a God. The most popular philosophy now that I know can't be a God, because if there were God, how could there be so many anomalies in the world? How many evil, so many horrible things? God can't exist, therefore. But without God, nothing can exist. You have to come up with a concept that replaces God. And no concept replaces God, because all the senses, unless you remove senses, consciousness, personality, love, hate, all these different emotions, they're all personal emotions. They're not impersonal emotions. A dead nail, a doornail, doesn't have any love. It doesn't have any fear. We may say in a sentence, the doornail loves this type of wood or that. That's not poetic, but it's not realistic. Because it's not a living being. These type of descriptions are only meant for living entities that have personal desires. Will, as they say, they have will. So their will means personal. There's nothing that has no life that has a will. So they're full of contradictions in these theories, these atheistic theories, and they make no sense. They just talk. But in reality, everything completely is dependent upon the Lord. Everything is Him. What's that verse? That after many, many births, Pavanam Jamanamante Jnanamam Prapajate Vasudeva Sarvamiti Samahatma Sudurlabha. So Vasudeva Sarvam Iti means Vasudeva is everything. Everything. There's nothing outside of him. There's nothing but the Lord. We are nothing but the Lord. That doesn't mean we're the little part and parcel is everything, but he's Brahman. Vasudeva Sarvamiti. So that Brahman, we say, yes, he's Brahman, I'm Brahman. Aham Brahmasmi, I'm also Brahman. That doesn't mean you're the big Brahman. You're the little tiny Brahman, a living entity. And you have little senses by which you can hear. You can only hear a certain distance, but God can hear everything. Your hearing is limited. You can hear everything within your parameters of your hearing level. As soon as it goes out, you can't hear anything. So this is how to see the universal form. You can see it in a somewhat impersonal way, but actually it's not impersonal. The Lord just allows those who want to be troublemakers and they want to be independent and they want to rebel, they're rebellious. He gives them a chance to concoct rebellious atheistic ideas so they can have some fun. Not so much fun, and it doesn't give so much pleasure, but they get some pleasure, kind of perverted pleasure. Although that word perverted is almost going out of usage now because nothing's perverted. Everything's so perverted that the word loses its meaning. Anyway, that's another topic. So this is really amazing when you think of it like this. Everything is Vasudeva. And all the parts and parcels, even if they don't have will, they're not living entities, they work under the direction of Vishnu, of the Lord. And again, the Lord may invest some of his controlling power, not that he loses it, not that it can be used against him, but he allows some of that controlling power to the living entities. And the more they show themselves to be responsible, the more he invests. For example, Brahma, one spirit soul, one living entity is put in charge of designing and engineering the whole universe. That's a big task. We couldn't do that. But one can become qualified enough to do that in the material world. And what to speak of the spiritual world. Persons like Narad Muni can go everywhere. Material world, spiritual body, no birth and death, no everything. Looks just like Vishnu even. You can have a form that looks exactly like Vishnu. A few differences. Srivat's sign, it's the only difference. Lord's got we're so envious. For example, in Garga Samhita, we see what happens to Kamsa afterwards. You know what happens to Kamsa?
Gets a form like Vishnu.
Yeah, he gets a Vishnu form. And he comes to see Lord Krishna at the yajna, at the Rajasuya sacrifice organized by Ugrasena under the direction of Krishna. Because this is after Kamsa was killed. Kamsa was killed when Lord was just a an adolescent. Now this is later on, and they've replaced. And then Kamsa comes, and his brothers, they were all killed by Krishna and Balaram. Now came Vishnu forms, paying obeisances, offering beautiful prayers to Krishna, Balaram. They were so delighted to see that all the four features, the Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, were all there. Krishna is Vasudev, Balaram is Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Krishna's first son, is Pradyumna, and Aniruddha, Krishna's grandson, is Aniruddha. So they're all there, and Kamsa and his brothers were so happy to see them. They'd never seen them before because they died before they were born, before Krishna had any children, before he married Rukmini. Anyway, it's amazing to see how everyone gets what they want from the Lord. And if you want to be really like the Lord and you're willing to do it properly, then he'll give you a position like in Vaikuntha with a form very similar to his.
Thank you, Maharaj. Are there any questions or comments? Yes, Bhakti Jiva Prabhu.
I was just wondering, if we appreciate the universal form, is that connecting with Krishna as well? Thank you.
Yes, it is connecting with Krishna. Like we read here in the purport that what was it? I think it was saying that Prabhupada was saying the materialist should worship this universal form. Consequently, for a materialist also, worship of the universal gigantic form of the Lord leads one to the right path. So they're worshiping Krishna, and in this way, like he says in the Bhagavad Gita, as they worship me with love and devotion, I reveal the path by which they can come to me. So it's one stage of worshiping Krishna. It's his form. Yes, Magadari Prabhu.
I had a question about I'm spacing out.
One thing that stood out to me in the purport was some of the points about the demigods. Specifically, just the point that if one wants to offer some sort of worship, the person to worship is the Supreme Person, Krishna, but some people want to ask things from the demigods, but they want to ask useless things, just material things, which are all temporary. So they don't actually give any happiness, because anything temporary is bound to deteriorate and be gone at some time. Like Prabhupada said in the purport, the real entity is the Lord himself, and all others are imaginary, for everything is included in him only. So anything temporary in the world is imaginary, like a dream. It's just as in a dream, someone may have a big kingdom or something, but then they wake up and there's no more kingdom. So like that, we might have some huge mansion or something in this lifetime, but then once we die and change bodies, we no longer have any mansion. So like that, anything temporary, it won't bring any happiness. It's more or less imaginary. So asking these material things from demigods it's a useless endeavor. And in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that the materialists who are worshiping these demigods, they're considered less intelligent. It says, men of small intelligence worship I'll read the Sanskrit. Antavattu palam tesham tadbhavat yalpamedasam devan deva yajo yanti madbhakta yanti mam api. Men of small intelligence worship the demigods, and their fruits are limited and temporary. Those who worship the demigods go to the planets of the demigods, but my devotees ultimately reach my supreme planet. So when Brahma was asked by Hiranyakashipu for immortality, Brahma told him, I can't actually give you that because I'm not immortal myself. So seeking after these material things doesn't have any use, but if we want the real thing, best to go to Krishna. But if someone wants to ask for something from demigods, then they should ask them to help them in their service to Krishna, help them achieve pure devotional service, help them surrender to the Lord. So those are just a few points. Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah. The demigods can tell, we can preach as far as our realization goes. Shouldn't go beyond that. For example, someone may say, well, how do I remain brahmachari? So a grihasta may say, well, I'm not qualified to tell you because I'm grihasta. But you can tell them how you practiced brahmachari up to a certain point. For so many years, you practiced brahmachari. That in itself is a very nice explanation. Let's say for so many years, 5 years, you practiced brahmachari. You were in the brahmachari. You can say, I can tell you that much, and I can tell you what the scriptures say about how to do it for longer than that. I experienced that by doing this, by thinking that way, by acting this way, by performing this, by associating this, by doing this, studying like this, eating like that, I was able to, see what I mean? So it's not like they have nothing to say. They can preach to their realization. Different birds can fly on different levels, it's a fact. But when you're instructing someone that has no information about brahmacharya or little information, then you can give that up to the point of your realization. So I realized this, that I wasn't brahmachari before, but I did this and I did that, and I was able to do it. And so someone would say, well, then what did you gain from it? Was there any benefit? Yes, it was all this benefit, and you can explain the benefits you got. Sometimes we think, how can I preach? I'm not a very advanced devotee. We may not be so advanced devotees, that's all right, but we can preach to our level, level of realization. Just like Prabhupada used to give the example of little Saraswati, Shyamasundara Malati's daughter. She was just a few years old. She was traveling with him. And so she would go up to people, do you know who Krishna is? They would say, no. She'd say, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prabhupada said, that's preaching. She was preaching to her. So everyone can preach up to their level of realization. And so in that way, just like monitor system, or parents you see in India, they're very good at doing this. They relegate the responsibilities to their children. The oldest one takes care of all the younger ones, and then that oldest one puts the second oldest one in charge of taking care of those three, and then that one takes charge. And they're all supervising and being supervised. It's a wonderful system. So that's a system also in preaching. So that's how a person who's, say, a new devotee can go out and actually take part in the ecstatic process of making devotees. But they're not actually making the devotees, because Krishna has to give his ultimate approval and ultimate benediction and all that comes. But one can participate in the Lord's activities this way, become a cooperative citizen. A good citizen cooperates with the government. The government says, shouldn't do this, and good citizen doesn't. Not only does he not do it, but he trains his next generation that they shouldn't do it either, and why? So a devotee can preach, and although he doesn't make the devotees himself, he participates in the process. And as it is a wonderful thing for the Lord, when his parts and parcels wander off into the material world and suffer one birth after the other, he's so compassionate, he wants to bring them back home. I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Just see how much compassion he has. And the living entities can assist him, and they'll be endowed with compassion. Sometimes you hear this question, I can't preach because I have no compassion. How do you get compassion? Try preaching. You try preaching on behalf of the Lord, then he endows you with some compassion, little bits. And as you use that well, he had some compassion. And what did he do? Well, he helped bring so many people to Krishna consciousness. Well, give him more compassion. Let him have a big gulf of compassion. And then one can even be a soul that saves a whole universe. A living entity actually has the possibility of delivering a whole universe in the material world back to home, back to God, by the grace of the Lord.
Jai. Thank you, Maharaj. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.